and terror. There's photographs of torture that took place in Iraq in this, which some viewers might find upsetting.
Your Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States.
America sees itself as a no-nonsense place where solid values are instilled in the people by rational leaders. This series looks at what happens when the leaders turn to crazy ideas.
We had a master sergeant that could stop the heart of a goat.
What, just by looking at it?
Just by wanting the goat's heart to stop.
And did the goat's heart stop?
He did it at least once.
I want them to want to get out of there.
To want to get out of the cage?
Yes. He's trying to get out of there. He knows he wants to get out of there. Get out of there. Somehow get out of that. Get out of this ray that's going at him.
This film tells the story of how secret military initiatives like these transform themselves into secret military initiatives like these. When the Abu Ghraib torture photographs leaked out into the world, Donald Rumsfeld flew to the jail to explain that they were basically holiday snaps taken by a few bad apples with no support from on high.
In recent days, there's been a focus on a few who have betrayed our values and sullied the reputation of our country. Like each of you, I'm sure, and like most Americans, I was stunned. It was a body blow.
The Bush administration wants the world to believe that these were random acts of sadism, but we have found that some experiments conducted here and at Guantanamo Bay have a bizarre and secret military ancestry. The detainees were guinea pigs in the midst of a long-awaited opportunity to try stuff out. This story begins in May 2003, when torture was still considered funny in America.
U.S. forces in Iraq are using what some are calling a cruel and unusual tool to break the resistance of Iraqi POWs, and trust me, a lot of parents would agree. Some prisoners are being forced to listen to Barney, the purple dinosaur, sing the I Love You song for 24 straight hours, according to Newsweek magazine. One U.S. operative told Newsweek that he listened to Barney for 45 minutes straight and never wants to go through that again. 4 minutes past there. Katie, sing it with me.
No. I think about after an hour, they're probably spilling the beans, don't you think?
Totally.
All right, Ann, thanks very much. Now we're going to go outside for another check of the weather with Mr. Roker. That's funny, isn't it, Al?
Actually, if they don't crack, then they move to the Teletubbies. And that just crushes them like a bug.
Sunny day, sweeping the clouds away. On my way to where the air is sweet. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? Sort of like that.
It must be a little bewildering for you to hear that these songs of yours are being used somehow in cargo containers in Iraq.
Well, it's not what we expected when we wrote them, let's put it that way. But the story claimed that a PSYOPs army company was using the theme from Barney and Sesame Street music and Metallica music, I believe, Enter Sandman, I think was mentioned, to play to prisoners. And a sergeant claimed that due to the cultural differences, and that's what he said, not me, that prisoners would crack when they heard this music after a while, and I guess started spewing all kinds of information. And my first reaction is, oh my gosh, is my music really that bad? And I was kind of horrified by it, to be honest.
And do you think the prisoners, as well as giving away vital information, are learning new letters and numbers?
Well, wouldn't that be an incredible double win? The way we do Sesame Street and Between the Lines is that we have educational researchers who really test whether these songs and other things we write are working, whether the kids are learning. And one year they asked me to write a song to explain what a mountain is. and I wrote a really silly yodeling song about what a mountain was. And 40% of the kids had known what a mountain was before they heard the song, and after they heard the song, only about 26% knew what a mountain was. So I figure if I have the power to suck information out of people's brains by writing these songs, maybe that's something that could be useful to the CIA for brainwashing techniques. Ja, ja, das is a mountain part of the ground that sticks way up high. I don't remember what comes after that, but that's all they needed. You don't know what a mountain is now, right? It's gone.
I hoped Christopher might solve the mystery of how his music came to be blasted at Iraqi prisoners, but he didn't know. In fact, he had his own, somewhat different questions.
Well, I don't even know what rate applies. That's what
It would be a money machine.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Nobody's
I mean,
gonna
I
do
could be
that.
helping my country, we could be helping our country, and kind of cleaning up at the same time. What rate would even apply?
I don't know.
Let's say that it was a public performance. How do you pay for that?
I never did confessionals before. I don't know.
But
720 cents an hour. That would be $7.20 an hour.
right. So
$70 a day for...
that's only in one interrogation room now.
That's one
right?
room. You know, you
Yeah.
have a dozen rooms working. You're talking money. 24 hours a day. No, that's too high. But if I were negotiating for ASCAP, I would say it was come in the category of a theme rate, where there's so much repetition of the same piece.
Right. So interrogation rooms would be an extension
A
of
new
that.
category.
Right. And I think it's about time that there we go. This has never happened to him in 35 years.
Interrogation rooms.
Right. Well, maybe that's so sick.
Like much of America, Christopher and Danny seemed unsure how to respond to this story, so the conversation shifted between satire and a genuine desire to make some money.
Wanting money for the use of your music in a time of crisis seems a little shabby to me.
Well, is that what you think? But I would have agreed with that, except that let's look. Well, I stand. You got me there. But shabby has never stopped me before.
All I knew was that Barney had been deployed in the small Iraqi town of Al-Qaim, and that the man who broke the story was Newsweek's Adam Piori. It turned out that the story begins with a meeting between Adam and a sergeant called Mark Hadsell.
Well, I actually met Mark Hadsell on one of my first days in Al-Qaim. We pulled up in front of the police station, and I badly needed to urinate. And I didn't want to do it in front of the police station or in the bushes because I was afraid I would offend the local Iraqis. And his assistant in his Humvee told me that I should just go on the front tire. And so I started to, and Hadsell threatened to kill me. So that was how I met the guy. He said, "Do you want to get shot?" So I quickly found a different...
Did he have a smell on his face as he said it?
I don't think so. I'll just do a slideshow here.
Maybe Sergeant Hadsell felt guilty for threatening to shoot Adam, because one night in the command centre, Hadsell gave Adam a tip-off. He said, "Go look out by where the prisoners are."
And I went over, and there was a Connex shipping container, and there was a young soldier standing with a really bright light that he was flashing on and off into the shipping container. It was night. Really bright light that he was flashing into the shipping container, and they were blasting Metallica. And, you know, I'm sure it was reverberating around inside this metal container and driving whoever was in there crazy.
And how loud was it?
It sounded pretty loud to me. I don't know. But it wasn't, I mean, I could hear this soldier, you know, when he told me I needed to go away.
Adam called Newsweek and pitched them a number of stories. Their favourite was the Metallica one.
They wanted a complete playlist.
Adam asked around while his photographer took these pictures of the shipping containers where the music was blasted at the detainees. These photographs have never been seen before. Newsweek didn't print them because it was a funny story. It turns out that the prisoners here were blasted with Metallica, Barney, Sesame Street, the soundtrack to the movie Triple X, and a band called Matchbox 20.
I was told to write it sort of as a humorous type thing. They called the Barney people for a comment, and they got put on hold. And the last line in the article was, it broke us too, because they were playing the Barney I Love You song.
And then I discovered that similar techniques were also being used on prisoners at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. One of the victims was a Mancunian called Jamal Al-Harith.
There'll be times I'd be thinking, what's happening? I'm from Manchester, I'm a nobody, why am I here? But, that's not the sort of thing you dwell on. You just learn to take the day and to handle it.
And then Jamal told me the details of his own musical bombardment, and the details were so unexpected, it was almost impossible to know what to think of them.
This is our record-breaking diesel concept car. Record-breaking, just not that practical. Which is why at Vauxhall, we took the same technology and put it into our other diesels. The new performance diesels from Vauxhall.
We see Fiona exploring a new world, filled with learning, filled with wonder. We see standing ovations and records broken. We see her finishing at the top of her class. We see children full of potential. We're inspired to create software that helps them reach it.
He's jumping! Do it! Go!
This is Sergeant Dave Bell. He has a Kahoot loan fixed at just 5.7% APR for the life of the loan.
Copy! I got it. Fuck!
Unfortunately, Kahoot can only make you good with money.
Give me the key! Don't yell at me! Come on! Ah!
Starting in tomorrow's Daily Express, we're giving away £5 worth of free shopping at BHS this Christmas. How magic is that? Free shopping at BHS offer exclusively in tomorrow's Daily Express.
Express delivery. I love Puma.
When Puma went to Jamaica, they tried to fuse culture with big business.
Puma, we love you, Puma.
They just didn't realise how controversial that culture can be.
The homophobic attitude is not something that brands should be associating with.
Trainers Reggae and the Olympics, Monday at 11 on 4.
Jamal says he wasn't in Afghanistan to fight. He was sightseeing, but the Taliban threw him in jail thinking he was a British spy, and then the Americans picked him up thinking he was an Al-Qaeda spy, and the next thing he knew, he was in shackles and on his way to Guantanamo Bay, where he remained for the next 2 years.
They would have the noises that they were using.
Noises?
Yeah, just what I would describe as industrial noises and screeches and bangs and just playing it loud over when you're in an interrogation block. Compressed gas going through, you just hear all sorts of things, jumbled noises.
The Americans interrogated Jamal for 15 hours a day. They mistook his innocence for a steely unwillingness to crack. They were getting angrier with Jamal, but instead of beating him like they sometimes did, they did something extraordinary. It began with them putting a ghetto blaster in his interrogation room. What did they play you?
Fleetwood Mac, but it wasn't the Fleetwood Mac. They had a bunch of girls singing the exact same songs. But
so an all-girl Fleetwood Mac cover?
It sounded a bit like that, yeah. Yeah, just said, oh, I think you might like this or whatever. Put the CD on, then when it finished, you put on another one, he put on Matchbox 20.
This was different to the screeching and the industrial noises and the blasting of Barney and Al Kime. It was different and much stranger because they played him these CDs at normal volume. Were they doing this for entertainment purposes?
It's an interrogation. I don't think they were trying to entertain us. Or you might like this, have a listen to this. Put it in, then he left.
And you heard the whole CD?
Yeah, till it finished, and then after a while they'd come in, change it.
And put on, like, Chris Christopherson?
Yeah, put on 2 albums, I think, of him.
All the things you tell me, that seems the weirdest, doesn't it?
I don't know, because I don't know what's been done before in Torture and so on, so as I'm new to this.
Matchbox 20, a country rock band from Florida who are also being played thousands of miles away at the prisoners inside the shipping containers in Al Kime.
I was very surprised that you said to me that in Iraq they played Matchbox 20. And now that's thinking, why did they play the same CD to me as well?
Yes.
So the fact that they're playing these CDs in Iraq, then playing the same CDs play them in Cuba first and then play them in Iraq, means to me there is a program. They're not playing music because they think people like or dislike Matchbox 20 more than other music, or Chris Christopherson more than other music. So there is a reason that they're playing that. There's something else going on.
What was it about Matchbox 20 that they were considered suitable for torture in Iraq and Cuba?
It's a nice repeating hook, yeah? Okay, I'll talk.
It doesn't sound so bad.
No, it doesn't. There's a lot more unpleasant songs than that.
I'm surprised by that song. It didn't seem particularly grotesque at all.
But I wonder what's on the XXX soundtrack. This is more like...
This I understood. It was visceral and alien.
You know, they put together a CD before they left. The PSYOPs people where I was, up in Al Kime, they put together a CD of songs they thought would be particularly effective.
In North Carolina, in Fort Bragg.
Yeah, I was told the speakers are especially tinny, you know, so it's just that much more annoying.
You know what they're trying to break you as a person. That's, you know, clear 100%. You don't think about how deep the rabbit hole goes. But you know it is deep. You know it is deep.
After 6 months of tense and delicate negotiations with the Pentagon, I was finally allowed to see PSYOP's CD collection.
And behind me is a selection of some regional music that's particular to the Middle East area of the world. We want them to listen to what we have to say. Mm-hmm. And the music, as you heard earlier, is a big draw for our radio broadcast.
You've got some Western stuff as well as the Arabic stuff. You've got Avril Lavigne and Norah Jones. What would these be used for?
I don't really want to go into that necessarily as far as particular locations.
This is the US Army's Psychological Operations Headquarters. It's the unit that blasted the Iraqi prisoners with Barney and Matchbox 20. So whose job is it to choose which music?
That's the responsibility of the PSYOP specialist, working in conjunction with the analyst.
PSYOPs are the US Army's multimedia propaganda department. They print leaflets and make radio shows to convince the enemy to cooperate, and the CDs are supposed to just provide musical interludes between the propaganda messages.
I remember one time we had some of the local Afghan guards who stopped at our gate, and they were kind of unsure of whether they were supposed to be there or not, but he kept handing us slips of paper with writing on it, and after we took it back to some folks that could read Dari, there was nothing more than song requests.
So why are PSYOPs also using their CDs to torture people in amusing and surprising ways? It wasn't their job. They showed me their TV studios and their archive library with videos labelled Guantanamo Bay. PSYOPs aren't supposed to be torturers, they're supposed to basically be leafleters. Here's a typical PSYOP leaflet.
So nobody benefits from the use of weapons of mass destruction. Any unit that chooses to use weapons of mass destruction will face swift and severe retribution by coalition forces. Unit commanders will be held accountable if weapons of mass destruction are used. But as you can see, it clearly links an unfulfilled need on their part with a desired behavior on our part. Their unfulfilled need is they don't want to face severe retribution. And our desired behavior is don't use weapons of mass destruction. Well, they didn't, so this may very well have been effective, but it's certainly possible that this influenced a lot of people not to use them.
Then I was bustled out of the conference room and into a wood-lined office.
There you are. I'm Colonel Jack N., middle name, Jack N. Sumi. I'm the commander of the 4th Psychological Operations Group, Airborne, Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
I asked Colonel Sumi about the musical torture, and he said he didn't know much because he was new, but he was sure it wasn't PSYOP's idea. He said PSYOPs were co-opted because they were the ones with the CDs and the loudspeakers.
We are always in support of the commander. And the commander is, the senior commander, the maneuver commander, or an area commander is never a PSYOP officer. We are always a support force. So when we attach that PSYOP force to that commander, he may identify a use of psychological operations loudspeaker capability for that very reason. If we have combat forces in the field, I would rather see our PSYOP capability being used to support those combat forces as opposed to some other mission like you kind of outlined.
The colonel wouldn't say who gave the order to torture people musically, and he said he had no idea why Jamal was played Chris Christopherson at normal volume in Guantanamo Bay. When I asked him who invented the technique, he said he didn't know that either. But after 3 years of research into the history of these experiments, I think I have pinpointed the culprit in the hills above San Francisco. It's as much a surprise to him as it is to me. It's this man.
Little sounds that just kind of go right through the center of the brain. So I am relaxed. Free flow of ideas come to me now. I enjoy being creative. And then we'd mix that down so I enjoy being creative. I am relaxed.
In the late 1970s, Stephen got a covert and entirely out-of-the-blue visit from a lieutenant colonel. He said he thought Stephen's music might bring about world peace, but Stephen was paranoid about the whole thing.
Would this be a question of aiding and abetting the, quote, enemy? And on a larger level, though, it's for my country. Another level, it's for the world. And world peace, you know, it's hard to be against world peace.
So your initial thought was, you know, this man is from the enemy?
Well, sure. And how do I know he's who he says he is? I don't want music for healing or peace to be used in the wrong way.
The lieutenant colonel cross-questioned Stephen about the psychic power of music. But beyond some vague talk about world peace, the lieutenant colonel, who said his name was Jim, didn't give much away about his intentions. Did Jim tell you what he wanted to do with this information?
Oh, no.
Did you say to Jim, I'm paranoid that you've just approached me, you're a military person who I don't know?
I probably joked a little something about that. And that was when he said, feel my energy. And, you know, just, you know, look in my eyes and just feel. I mean,
did he say that? You know not to be paranoid with me because you can feel my energy?
There was something along those lines.
And so, although the whole thing was weird and unexpected, Stephen was left with a good feeling about the lieutenant colonel called Jim.
Once or twice over the last 15 years, his name came up.
And we wondered whatever happened to that.
Who was the lieutenant colonel called Jim? And how did this turn into this? This is Jim.
So come on in. Come into the play. Come into the sacred play zone. And I might even invite the wind, because out here the wind will come if you ask it to. Do you believe that?
We have met Jim before in this series. Why are you unlike my mental picture of a lieutenant colonel in the US military?
Because you haven't seen many. Yeah, the only reason that you have a funny picture of us is because you've been watching too many movies made by people who don't know anything about it.
It was Jim who realized during Vietnam that his men were being killed because they impulsively and kind-heartedly fired high, missing the enemy.
I find that the kind of human being that is attracted to military service has a great deal of difficulty being cunning.
And it was Jim who, with the Pentagon's blessing, journeyed into the New Age communities of California in a quest to learn cunning, which is where Stephen Halpern taught him about the psychic power of music. When Jim returned from his Californian odyssey, he wrote this secret military document. In Jim's 1st Earth Battalion, soldiers would carry baby lambs into hostile countries. They would greet the enemy with sparkly eyes and an automatic hug. Soldiers would attain the power to pass through objects, sense plant auras, stop their own hearts with no ill effects, and kill goats just by staring at them. But Jim's manual wasn't only about harnessing the power of the paranormal. It also suggested psychically mind-changing the enemy by blasting them with subsonic frequencies and acid rock music out of sync. Before Jim came along, military music was all about pageantry and energizing the troops. In Vietnam, soldiers blasted themselves with music to put them in the mood for battle. But the idea of the military using music to psychically mind-change the enemy, that was Jim's idea. Knowing what you know about the legacy of the 1st Earth Battalion and how pervasive it is in the military today, that thing I just told you about what was happening in the containers, could that have happened because of the 1st Earth Battalion?
Sure.
Now at PC World for only $699, the StereoPix PC from Fujitsu Siemens Computers with an Intel Pentium 4 processor with HT technology 3.2 GHz. Massive power and performance for all the family. A recordable DVD for creating and copying your own movies. 128 meg graphics for red-hot gaming. And a 17-inch TFT monitor. We've never seen so much for so little in a top brand PC. So hurry, it's only $699. PC World.
Benecol yogurt drink. Just 1 pot a day is enough to lower your cholesterol. Benecol, proven to reduce cholesterol. Try new strawberry flavour.
Why has your dad had to have a major operation?
Because he had lung cancer, caused by smoking.
What are you thinking when you look at that?
He changed. His hair, the way he looks happy there.
If you want to stop smoking, call 0800 169 0169.
Worried that your coloured hair has lost its softness and shine? New Dove Hair Silk nourishes your hair deep inside and leaves it as soft and shiny as the day it was coloured. New Dove Hair Silk revives coloured hair.
It was one of the biggest vaccination scares of recent times. If you knew what we now know, you may have acted differently. Dispatches, MMR, What They Didn't Tell You, Thursday at 9 on 4.
I wanted to know exactly how Jim's ideas, and ideas in general, float throughout the US Army until they become something like policy. Jim says it's rarely as simple as a commander giving an order. It's more like folklore, he says, or mythology.
Mythology has its power as a seed crystal. When I produced the 1st Earth Battalion Field Manual, which had 125 basic technologies in it, that the Army printed this document, and then the most creative leaders in the Army heard about it, because they all function in a network, you know, heard about it, took the manual, and literally used it like a catalog.
I was actually in the headquarters in Arlington, the U.S. Army INSCOM, Intelligence and Security Command headquarters at the time. And I heard about it about the same time everybody in the United States Army heard about it. No, somebody said, "Did you hear about the 1st Earth Battalion?" And I said, "The what?" And they said, "This guy, Shannon, just gave a paper at West Point, and you gotta read this paper. It's incredible." And I read it, and it just touched me. And I think it touched everybody that read it.
That's what the 1st Earth Battalion actually did, is give the rest of the Army Officer Corps and scientists the chance to think the unthinkable, meaning get out of the box, and then get out of the box, and then get out of the box.
It affected a lot of the command structure. And so a lot of people started thinking, particularly in the special ops area.
At Fort Bragg?
Yeah, well, at Fort Bragg and special forces type units. How could we apply this?
Jim's most fruitful idea was that Army scientists should journey to the wildest corners of their imaginations, be unafraid of seeming harebrained and half-baked in their pursuit of a new kind of weapon, something cunning and big-hearted and non-lethal.
Colonel John Alexander, as a function of being a member of the 1st Earth Battalion, introduced Los Alamos National Laboratories to the whole notion of non-lethal weapons. And now it's gone, you know, that spectrum of tools is just increasing by the day.
If we have an intruder, this is what we'll do. We'll net them.
John Alexander is the pioneer of strange and exotic military machines, such as the electric belt.
I know that Colonel Alexander was inspired by the 1st Earth Battalion.
Heavily.
Yeah.
He's come up with some pretty wild stuff. A lot of it's probably classified.
Sticky foam.
Oh, that's another one, yeah. The sticky foam stuff.
And that was a John Alexander
Yeah, that's a John Alexander invention, yeah.
He basically invented the field, gave it presence, began to sort out how it could be used and helpful, and continues to advise the Chief of Staff on its development.
Some of Colonel Alexander's great non-lethal advances in recent years have been in the field of acoustics, like the blast wave projector and the Curdler unit.
Acoustics have actually, there's a couple of companies that have made some pretty big leaps. American Technology now has an acoustic system that you can reach out with an acoustic beam up to a mile. As you get in, there is a switch, they can turn it up, and the power level gets extremely intense.
You are in a U.S. Army restricted zone. The use of deadly force is authorized in this area. Depart the area immediately or we
Jesus, Carl, that's horrible. There's a similar military machine in development called the Active Denial System, which blasts a long-range energy beam instead of a piercing sound.
Having been zapped by one of the prototypes, I can say it's a one-term learning experience. It hurts a lot.
Back in the 1980s and early 90s, the problem for fans of Jim's ideas was that there was nobody suitably wicked out there to test them out on. The Cold War was over, and these were the fallow years, so they had to test them out on each other instead. But then a golden opportunity arose in the form of a congregation of somewhat whacked-out Seventh-day Adventists, whose leader, David Koresh, was selling weapons illegally, and so the government went in. I think a dissection of what happened at Waco during the 51-day siege that followed will help to explain what happened in the shipping containers and Guantanamo Bay 10 years later.
I'm the kind of guy that I'll stand in front of a tank, you can run over me.
Can I have some ice cream?
A little bribery there. You know, right now you're considered a big terrorist, you know, and you can demand some important things like an ice cream or something, you know, maybe they might adhere to you.
The people within the church were somewhat alarmingly of one mind, David Koresh's mind. The people on the outside were even more alarmingly of no cohesive mindset whatsoever.
Next, we have a couple of Kansas City's finest members of the SWAT team. This one here is quite a specimen. I tell you, in all my years involved with SWAT, I've never seen a gentleman like this that I've learned so much from in just the short time I've been around him. It's just awesome is about the only word to describe him.
Honed to a fine edge, honed to kill.
That's right. He just Rambo. He's just like Rambo out here himself.
The church was surrounded by scores of soldiers and agents from different parts of the intelligence communities, each with their own idea about how to direct the siege. Those who were inspired by Jim Channon's 1st Earth Battalion, or inspired by people who were inspired by it, had to bide their time and wait for their turn. But then they got their chance.
They would do things like play sound tapes of rabbits being slaughtered or Nancy Sinatra singing songs, and then they would bring out lights at night, and not that Nancy Sinatra always was that bad, but the ones that she had kept. The point was this: they were trying to have sleep disturbance, and they were trying to take somebody that they viewed to be unstable to start with, and then they were trying to drive him crazy, and then they get mad because he does something that they think is irrational.
Maybe the agents thought that the lyrics to this song would persuade David Koresh to surrender.
You keep playing where you shouldn't be playing. And you keep thinking that you'll never get burned. Ha! I just found me a brand new box of matches, yeah. And what he knows you ain't had time to learn. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Yes, right here.
Mr. Ricks, is there a consideration to use psychological warfare? Have you discussed it at all?
I don't know what psychological warfare is.
It was reported in the paper that you would play loud music, keep bright lights on the compound all night to try to agitate the entire group. Is that a possibility?
We will not discuss tactics of that sort, but I would say the chances are minimal of doing that type of activity. Yes, ma'am.
There were the sounds of dying rabbits, dentist drills, helicopter rotor blades, and sirens. These ideas had been floating around like folklore for decades. Suddenly, for the first time in the agents' careers, they had the opportunity to put them into practice. The Branch Davidians were guinea pigs, a captive audience. Everyone thought this was all just about sleep deprivation, but I'm not so sure.
About 50,000 volts, about 26 watts.
It's the first non-lethal device that we've seen that's truly incapacitating. It's as close to incapacitating as anything we've ever seen.
This is Commander Sid Heal. He's great friends with the 1st Earth Battalion's Colonel Alexander and calls him his mentor. After the Colonel, Sid is America's leading exponent of exotic, non-lethal technologies. Sid doesn't believe that the various incidents of musical torture we've looked at are about something as banal as sleep deprivation.
I mean, sleep deprivation may be part of it, but there's easier ways of doing sleep deprivation than going to all those great lengths. And so as a result of that, my guess is, just from what you're describing, is that it's got some deeper hidden effect.
And there was a young soldier standing with a really bright light that he was flashing on and off into the shipping container. It was night, really bright light that he was flashing into the shipping container.
Sid Heal thought about Barney for a while, the flashing light, the repetitive music, and then he said he thought he had the answer. He said it must have been the fabled Bucher effect.
Back in the 1950s, when helicopters were crashing for no apparent reason, he was assigned to find out, well, hey, what's going on? The pilots that were surviving were describing feelings of nausea and dizziness and vertigo just before they lost control of the helicopter. What Dr. Bucher found out was that the rotor blades were strobing sunlight. And when it reached approximation of human brainwave frequency, which is roughly 0.3 to 30 hertz, it was interfering with the brain's ability to send correct responses to the rest of the body.
Sid says that for years, military scientists have tried to find a way of replicating the feelings of debilitating nausea suffered by the helicopter pilots in the late 1950s. The quest for the Bucher effect, Sid says, is the holy grail of the non-lethal world. So this technique of the flashing lights and the music and so on could be hitting people on that level, on almost psychic level.
That's my guess. It'd be the ultimate non-lethal.
It's trying to get them to talk in a what's the word?
Well, psycho-spiritual dimension. If you use, because we are made up that way, besides basic fear of being hit, we are also have a mental, spiritual, and psychic component, so why not use that? Why not go straight for the place where the being actually would decide whether to say something or not?
The problem historically has been is that the threshold between being permanently disabling and effective has been so narrow. For one thing is that any type of a non-lethal weapon that would force compliance as far as interrogation wouldn't be appealing to us at all because it wouldn't be used in court.
But of course they don't have those legal constraints inside a shipping container in Al Qaim. But there might have been another use of sound at Guantanamo Bay, something really quite sinister that could explain the mystery of why Jamal was played Chris Christopherson and Matchbox 20 at normal volume.
Six-speed manual or automatic transmission. All-wheel steering. 150 brake horsepower. And it's a diesel. The first diesel to perform like a Saab. The new 9.3 Sports Diesel from just $18,995.
Dear, why has your dad had to have a major operation?
Because he had lung cancer. Caused by smoking.
That sounds horrible and scary. But what happened to you when your mum told you that?
I felt worried because I've always associated cancer with death. I thought my dad was going to die.
What are you thinking when you look at that?
He changed. His hair, the way he looks. He looks really weird now.
What have you learnt from all of these things that have been going on?
Don't smoke. I can smoke.
If you want to stop smoking, call 0800 169 0169.
Sky.
You're up to 4 times more likely to give up smoking when you use your local NHS Stop Smoking service with NRT. Call 0800 169 0169.
Higher Energy, the new men's fragrance by Dior.
UK Music Hall of Fame. Join us for the finale. With Madonna, Bono, Rita Marley, Priscilla Presley, performances by Polyphonic Spree, The Thrills, Beverly Knight, Robbie Williams, Paul Rodgers and Queen. UK Music Hall of Fame, after Crazy Rulers of the World.
One of the great conspiracy theories is that governments try to control the minds of the people with subliminal, inaudible sounds. At Waco, that conspiracy theory nearly came true. This is Dr. Igor Smirnov. He's a specialist in subliminal sounds. Midway through the Waco siege, the army flew Dr. Smirnov to America. They wanted the doctor to add subliminal messages to the musical bombardment. The idea was to have the voice of God subliminally order David Koresh to surrender. Charlton Heston was going to play the voice of God, and it would have happened, except the army wanted Dr. Smirnov to take full responsibility if anything went wrong. The doctor refused this, and that was that. In the end, this is how the Waco siege was resolved.
I am relaxed. Free flow of ideas come to me now. I enjoy being creative. And then we'd mix that down so I enjoy being creative. I am relaxed. And
Stephen was demonstrating the power of subliminal sounds there. He was whispering for the purposes of demonstration because you can't hear actual subliminal sounds. Stephen told Jim Channon about the power of these sounds during Jim's late 70s Californian Odyssey. He says evangelical churches frequently use them with great success.
that they lace a series of subliminals saying you will give more money to the donations.
In evangelical churches?
Oh, yes, yes.
And what, they blast it during the hymns?
Yes. So again, you need something as a carrier wave so that people don't hear it. But when people are singing or when there's some pre-recorded music, when the people are walking in, so often nowadays that may not be the choir, it's just a CD that's being played. Well, if that has also mixed underneath it suggestions to give more generously, voila, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the fact that the donations were increased. We hear stories that there's research in military circles, but I'm not privy to that.
Could this explain why Jamal was played Chris Christopherson at normal volume? Were subliminal sounds being played underneath, influencing Jamal to confess? Colonel Alexander says there isn't a chance that subliminal sounds are being used in Guantanamo Bay. He says my producer John Sargent and I are basically crazy for even suggesting it.
Sounds like pixie dust to me.
What's pixie dust?
Magic stuff you sprinkle out and do whatever you want with it. I mean, if you think about it, it makes no sense. I mean, the problem, again, with acoustics is propagation. We know how sound dissipates. It follows very specific physical laws. But how do you do that without affecting us? Anybody who's out there would hear it.
Colonel Alexander said we were nuts to think that the army would even contemplate using subliminal sounds.
As I'm telling you, it is not something that was brought up or addressed, and we covered the waterfront as far as, technologies. And the whole CT or conspiracy theory thing, you'll find a host of these things about how we're, warping their brains and monitoring people and and all that. And it's just nonsense.
We left the Colonel's house feeling suitably chastised, like crazy conspiracy theorists for thinking that the army was using subliminal sounds. And then we found this leaked military document listing the current advancements in non-lethal technologies. And buried away in it, almost subliminally, was this. And here's the list of contributors to this document. When I asked Colonel Alexander to explain this, he said it wasn't his fault if some of his fellow contributors included nutty stuff like subliminal sounds in this secret military document.
But how do you do that without affecting us? Anybody who's out there would hear it.
This struck me at the time as an unassailable argument. Of course it couldn't work. The sound operator would be influenced too. The thing is, I now realised, if subliminal messages had been used against Jamal, there was a clue in Jamal's account, a clue which suggested that the military had craftily solved this vexing problem. Here's the clue.
Or you might like this. Have a listen to this. Put it in, then he left.
You're definitely on the dark side. I don't think anybody went to that lengths of being able to set up that elaborate of a system without some ultimate scheme in mind. We don't experiment on each other, not in our culture.
My conversation with Sid Heel took place just a few weeks before these photographs leaked out into the world. So is Abu Ghraib, like Waco, an experimental interrogation lab teeming with ideas? The Bush administration would have us believe that these are random acts of sadism, but this soldier, Lindy England, spoke to CBS television shortly after her arrest.
What were you thinking when those photographs were taken?
I was thinking it was kind of weird. I didn't really, want to be in any pictures.
Lindy England says she was ordered to pose with the prisoners, and the people who did the ordering were none other than PSYOPs.
I was instructed by persons in higher rank to stand there, hold this leash, and look at the camera. And they took a picture for a PSYOP, told to stand there, give a thumbs up, smile, stand behind all the naked Iraqis in the pyramid, take a picture. Well, they were for PSYOP reasons, and the reasons worked. They'd come back and they'd look at the pictures and they'd state, well, that's a good tactic, keep it up. That's working, this is working. Keep doing it. Just getting what we need.
We'd visited PSYOPs in October 2003, the very same month that the Abu Ghraib photographs were taken. I looked back and found an interview with a PSYOP analyst called Dave. Dave was telling me about the leaflets PSYOPs dropped in Iraq, and he was not involved with Abu Ghraib, but I wonder whether the same type of thinking was also behind the prison photographs. Maybe the photographs were PSYOP products designed to scare other prisoners.
We think about what impact they will have from the perspective of Iraqis. How would an Iraqi react to this, not how an American would react to this. Sure. And then if the product doesn't do well that way, when we have boards and we go through it and we look at each product separately and how it matches the national themes and objectives, how it matches our PSYOP themes, and whether we think it has potential for success. Then if it passes all our muster, then we'll produce it either here or forward, depending on the situation. It's not like selling Coke, because a lot of times what you're doing here is trying to sell someone something they might not want in their hearts, but know that they have to do in order to survive. So it causes ambiguity and problems. It's like selling someone vitamin D to drink, or something they don't really want, but think they might need to survive.
The musical torture inspired by Jim Channon seemed at odds with Jim's humanist and peace-loving 1st Earth Battalion manual. And when I first mentioned the Barney torture to Jim, his response was characteristically sweet-natured. He sighed and said how lovely children's music was.
I'm actually quite pleased to hear that. If, as a function of lightening the environment and giving these people some comfort, they would more readily explain where their forces were positioned and shorten the war, damn good.
I think Jim was imagining something more like a creche than a shipping container in the desert heat. So I persevered. I told him exactly how his ideas were being interpreted, but Jim seemed to be in denial, like a grandparent who wouldn't countenance the idea that his grandchildren would ever misbehave. But I guess if they play them the Sesame Street song once or twice, then that's lightening and comforting. But if they play it sort of 50,000 times in a row, that's more torturous.
I'm not a psychologist.
In the army, ideas float around like folklore, but then, when they become concrete, it seems that nobody will take responsibility for them.
Like each of you, I'm sure, and like most Americans, I was stunned. It was a body blow.
The army is supposed to have a logical chain of command, but if crazy ideas like mind control float around like folklore, nobody is accountable when they are put into practice, and so soldiers end up doing whatever they want. In next week's film, we see just how lethal these crazy ideas can get.
That's next Sunday at 8. John Ronson's book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, is out, price $16.99. Order and call 0870 123 4344 or hit channel4.com/shop. Next tonight, the final of UK Music Hall of Fame. To make it even more special, Priscilla Presley is there to represent Elvis, Rita Marley to represent Bob. Live performances, glowing tributes, the lot.